still morning, so I'm going to say good morning, everyone, and we really appreciate you attending this little workshop that we're doing on home buying, and it's primarily targeted for the initial home buyer, the first-time home buyer. So thank you for coming, and just to let you know, we're going to also film this, and we're going to put it on our website when it's ready. So if you know people that missed out today, tell them no sweat, it's coming. Before we get started, the first thing I'd like to say is that we're doing this in partnership with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, formerly known as Prudential, and they brought quite a team with them today. So I'm going to introduce them, starting with Tom Jangula. He's the manager there, so thank you, Tom, for helping us out with all of this today. Betty Luna, Mike Pelton, Kathy Smolinski, and then they brought with them a lender, and it's from Kellogg Community Credit Union. His name is Brian Mallarney. Thank you for coming. We really appreciate your support and helping us out with this training today. We're going to do, I say we loosely because I'm not doing the majority of the work. That frontline crew there are doing the work today. They're going to talk to you today about buying homes and what you need to do to get ready to buy a home and all the other stuff that goes with it. And there's quite a list of stuff that goes with it. So they're going to run through their presentation, and then after the presentation, if you've got, am I right? And then after the presentation, if you're ready for questions, go ahead and ask them. We're going to leave a lot of time for your questions. If you have more questions at the end, feel free to stay over if you've got the time. And then each one of the realtors and the lender will stand by to help you out with any of your questions. Sound like a good plan? All right, here we go. Tom, you're up.
Thank you, Trina. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. I appreciate your time, and hopefully you're going to find more than a little bit of value with what we have to say today. First, let me just give you a brief bit of information about us as a company, Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Michigan Real Estate. We have about 40 offices with about 600 agents throughout Michigan and northern Indiana. I manage 2 of those offices. One is here in Battle Creek, and the other is in Marshall. In the southwest Michigan area, which is probably where all of you care about. We have about 200 agents, and so we're able to provide a lot of assistance for you. We have a great network just to make sure that we're finding the best opportunities for you all. If you're looking to buy or sell, there's just within our own company, we obviously have a great referral network. What we're going to do today, as I said, or as Trina said, is just I'm going to go through a brief presentation here. It's really designed not to answer your questions, but really maybe generate questions for you. These are going to be some bullet points that might help you think, oh yeah, I should ask about that. I'm going to try to do that in a pretty short amount of time so we have as much time to answer your questions as possible. And then we're kind of literally just going to go, Betty will answer the first, then Mike, and then Kathy, give them all a chance. If someone feels like there's something specific to add to a question or an answer, I should say, after someone else has responded, then we'll jump in there. But that's kind of how our process is going to work. So if we can start with our first screen. Again, are you ready to buy a home? What are the things that you want to think about? Creditworthiness, where are you at? Reliability of and steady source of income. Obviously, we're all at a point where you never know how things are going to go, but you want to make sure that you feel pretty comfortable. Your employment history, money for a down payment, and what can you afford? So those are probably all questions that you're going to be thinking about. If we move on, the next thing is, okay, so I think I'm in a position to buy a home. What matters to me? Do you care about location? Do you want to be in the country? Do you want to be in the city? Condition of the home. Are you a handyman? Do you want a fixer-upper? Do you need something that's perfect and ready to go? Do you not want to mess around with the yard and stuff? So maybe you should be in a condo versus a home. And what other features might you care about? And then moving forward, cost and budget, things that you probably should be thinking about a little bit. This is a pretty full screen, I'm sorry for that. Cost, upfront costs that you're going to need to factor in. Earnest deposit, escrow, down payment, loan application fees. Then you get closing costs, your appraisal fee, credit report fee, mortgage insurance, originations, points, titles insurance. these are all things, again, as we go through this, if you have questions as we're progressing, just ask. Other costs, home inspections, your actual homeowner's insurance and property taxes. Budget. What do you need to think about from a budget standpoint? Talking to a lender, getting a pre-qualification, getting a pre-approval, and of course, what can you afford in a house? You may not know what your monthly budget equates to in actual dollar terms. So look at your income, look at your savings, what you're going to be able to spend for a down payment, your monthly expenses, your debt, and what the lenders care about, debt-to-income ratio. And then actual process, once you think, okay, I'm ready to go. So one of the first logical steps is probably talking to a lender to get an idea of, again, how much can I spend, so you know where to start looking. Then you can start looking, and I just noticed a typo there. Sorry about that. But that's where obviously us as real estate agents come in to assist in that process, making your offer, actually applying for your loan, going through the home inspections, and actually then getting to the point of closing and getting that home. And so that is the process. And I think that's where we're at. So now we're at a point where we're ready to start looking at questions.
Okay, if you have any questions, would you just raise your hand? I'll come by with the mic and we can have you talk so everyone can hear the question.
Generally, how long does the process take from when you actually find a home to actually getting through closing and it's now your property?
That will depend on your lender and how long, and if you're really prepared. That's the most important thing. When you start working with your lender, you want to follow through with everything that they ask for as quickly as possible. The quicker that you respond to your lender, the quicker the process will go. Typically, it takes between 4 and 6 weeks. I'm comfortable. Usually when I write a contract, I do put it out to the 6 weeks place. That way, if we run into any issues, we don't have to write extra addendums. Less paperwork involved, the easier the contract is to work through. So about 6 weeks is where it's going to take you.
Any other questions? Okay, if each of you would like to stand up and talk a piece of this, that might help generate some more questions also.
Brian, maybe from a lender.
Yeah, I was going to say
that would be a great place to start.
Good afternoon. Do you guys have any specific lending questions that are jumping out at you? I know there's so much detail on mortgages that it's probably hard to pinpoint, but one of the few things I guess I would hit on right away would be finding what you're comfortable with spending. I don't always calculate in your utilities and things like that, so you want to consider that. Typically, depending on what loan you go for, I would say that average is about 45% of all obligations, including housing, is usually the cap. Okay, and you can do some easy math to take your monthly gross income, take all of your debts, including your housing payments. Our website does have a mortgage calculator that is definitely helpful in your process. But one of those, and then one of the biggest things I want to talk about is down payment. A lot of people don't understand what a lender requires is 60 days worth of bank statements, okay? And what we're looking for is we need to source the ability to do the down payment. It can either come from your own funds, it can come from investments, it can now come as a gift from a family member, okay? And talking real quick on the gifting part, you do have to source the donor's ability to give the gift, okay? Unfortunately, cash is not king in the mortgage business. It has to be verifiable, and cash is not considered a verifiable asset. As far as options are concerned, conventional, you can do as low as 5% down, okay? You have VA loans. I know there's obviously a lot of veterans or active military. So you have the VA loan. You also have FHA, which is 3.5% down, okay? Also, there's rural development. That's for homes that are kind of outside of the city limits, okay? And that will allow you to go up to 100% loan to value, so 100% of the sale price. Okay, so there's a lot of different options for you guys out there. As far as first-time home buyer products, okay, the biggest ones are going to be your FHA, VA, and then with your conventional, they just changed this year. Like I said, the 5% can be a gift, so that's kind of helpful for some of the younger buyers as far as getting that down payment money. Okay. Any questions jumping out at you?
How long does it usually take to process a VA loan?
VA is kind of what Betty had hit on. It's about a 4 to 6 week process, sometimes sooner. Basically, from the lender standpoint, once I have a fully executed purchase contract is when I take the ball and run with it with you guys. And that's when the underwriting process would start. But for government products, FHA, VA, no, unfortunately, we cannot submit a file until you have a fully executed purchase contract to go along with it, which is going to include, you're going to want to get your home inspection done if you elect to do one prior to the lender ordering appraisals and things that are necessary to underwrite the file. But I would say a minimum of 4 weeks on a VA loan. Yes.
Not sure how well you're going to be able to answer this question, but a lot of us younger folks in my branch have been able to discuss like the 5% down versus actually saving for your 20%.
Absolutely.
And I'm old school, and I'm kind of curious to know what your opinion is on, is it better to pay PMI or to wait and save your 20%? Because a lot of times, like when I've done the math, the interest rates can get up to 11%, and I'm still spending less by saving my 20% than to buying a house now at 4% interest and paying PMI for the next 5 years.
That's a good point, and really it does have a lot to do with your market conditions. If rates are continuing to increase, then absolutely it would make sense to get into the home while values are still somewhat low and pay that PMI insurance. It can go both ways. Like you said, if it's going to take you a 5-year plan to get your 20% down, then you're going to have to really weigh out those options. Ideally, 20% is the best option because you are not going to pay that PMI insurance. Because at this point, PMI is not tax deductible. I know in the past it has been, but that's really a kind of a tax advisor question. But good point. I mean, really, you got to weigh out your options. How long is it going to take me to get to the 20%? PMI insurance, especially with credit unions, is discounted, so it's, it may actually be very affordable to get into it with less down. Sorry, one more. The only other thing is values, the way they are increasing, you could end up getting a good deal on this home as they continue to climb and drop that PMI sooner. Yes. Okay, do you guys all understand what private mortgage insurance is? If you put down less than 20%, private mortgage insurance is charged. It's more of like a default insurance to the lender. Okay, it's a protection for the lender because there's higher risk on the lower you put down. Okay, that's what mortgage insurance is. Once you reach the 80% equity position, you can drop the lender is required to drop the PMI. Okay, you can do it 2 different ways, just by making your principal interest payments to get there. It's going to take you a little longer to do that. Or if you get into the home, do some improvements, values continue to climb, you can contact the lender, have an appraisal done, and at that time, if the value's there, then we're required to drop the mortgage insurance. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes.
One more thing I think is probably logical to add to that is, for a lot of first-time home buyers, this may not be your 20 or 30-year home. You may think that you're only going to be there for 5 years or some short period of time, where then you're going to be having an opportunity to move on. So again, you have to consider a little bit how long you're thinking you're going to be in the home.
Yeah, thank you.
I got a question real quick. So you mentioned having a down payment and saving for that, but I saw a million other fees and expenses.
Absolutely.
What is compared to a down payment? How much is that normally? Is that do I have to plan for a lot of extra money past my down payment to account for all that, or?
That's a very good question because you can do this a couple different ways. Okay, I'm just going to give you real general numbers here. Okay, you guys, because it really depends on the loan amount. Okay, so as far as the earnest money deposit is concerned, that's more something you guys deal with a real estate agent on. It's a good faith deposit to say, hey, I'm serious about buying this home. As far as actual closing costs are concerned, one of those is big is escrow. So if you choose that you want to have your tax insurance included into your payment, that's going to make a big difference on what your upfront withholdings will be. Okay? And I will say this while we're talking about escrow. Most lenders are going to require escrow for tax and insurance if you're putting a less than 20% investment into it. There is exceptions on that, okay, if you elect that you do not want to. Okay, but your general costs with your title insurance that you have to get for the lender, all the costs involved, I would say at a $100,000 mortgage, you're probably looking between $1,800 and $2,000 for the cost. Okay, that's with the credit union, we charge a $525 origination fee to originate the mortgage. Okay? Typical lenders are charging about 1%, somewhere in there. So I would say somewhere, between $500 and $1,000, you're going to pay an origination on $100,000. Okay? Again, I mentioned title insurance, which depends on the sale price. Appraisal fees, which range from $300 to $350. You have credit reports, $35. You have to determine if it's in a flood zone, but I would say roughly about $1,800 to $2,000. If you're adding in taxes and insurance, I would estimate with your first year's homeowner insurance premium between $3,500 and $4,000, roughly. That's really rough figures, you guys. One of the biggest things you can do, and a lot of buyers do this, especially first-time home buyers, is ask the seller for seller contributions towards your closing cost. Okay? On conventional loans, you can ask for up to 3% from the seller. So that can be $3,000 towards your purchase based on that $100,000, which is very helpful, especially when, like you said, I have to come up with $3,000 for down payment, another $4,000 for my closing costs. It adds up quick. VA loans, as well as FHA loans and rural development loans, all allow for VA is 4%, and the FHA product you can go up to 6% for seller concessions, as well as RD loans, rural development loans. So it's very helpful on the closing piece. Yes. She makes a good point. So if you guys were to ask the seller for assistance, let's say 6% on $100,000, so you're allotting $6,000. Okay, it's not going to cost you that much from the lender standpoint to close the loan, but you can look at buying points, which points are basically buying down your interest rate. So if you know, and I kind of hits on what Tom said, if you know you're going to stay there, this is your dream house, you're never going to move, you may want to consider buying points to get your interest rate even lower. Okay. And also, like she said, home inspections, well and septic inspections can all be rolled in. Any cost involved with doing the mortgage can be rolled in at that, if the seller agrees to, excuse me.
Back to the PMI, how exactly is that calculated? Is it based on how big your loan's going to be? Because I know I've looked at several different options, and one minute it's $60 a month, the next time it's $200 a month. Like, what's the highest it can be, and what kind of determines that price? I'll
give you guys, you're exactly right. It depends on loan to value, so how much you're putting down. Depends on your credit score. I'll give you a perfect scenario. If your credit's above 740 on a conventional mortgage, putting 5% down, it would be 0.54% of the loan amount, and you divide that amount by 12. Okay, so if your credit's in the 600s, there's adjustments to that PMI that are going to increase your monthly. FHA has a 1.35% monthly PMI premium. It's a little bit higher. Still a great product, but the government does charge a upfront mortgage insurance on that loan as well as the monthly PMI. Okay. VA has depending on your status, okay, so if you're active military or retired veteran, and it depends on if it's your first use or subsequent use. So if you've never used your entitlement, there's different VA funding fees is what they call them. That's rolled into your loan, okay? So I'll give you an example. At $100,000, if it's your first time use on your entitlement, it's roughly 2.125% of the loan amount, and that's financed into your loan, okay? If you are a disabled vet, over 50%, they are going to waive the VA funding fee. That's definitely a good product. Any other questions?
Yeah. So if you have to go with PMI, and let's say you put down 5%, and looking at what it would take if you were to actually save up to the 20%, maybe that takes you a couple years and you don't want to wait that long. So you go with the PMI, 5%. Is there any kind of penalty for overpaying on your mortgage, or would that be a beneficial way to kind of make up the difference to get to the 20%?
It's a very, very good question. It's really going to depend on the lender, but our requirements is there is no prepayment penalty. So you can make as many payments to principal that you feel necessary. And that's a great point. If you were, a lot of cases, people are buying a home, a new primary residence, and trying to sell their current, and they want to plop down a lump sum of money once they sell that home. That's perfectly okay without any penalties at all. Okay, so if you were to reach that 80% equity position, we would drop that PMI.
Brian, would you talk a little bit about the credit report and the importance of a credit ratings and how it affects the loans?
Absolutely. Especially for young buyers, the biggest thing I can recommend is getting something active on your credit. Okay? A lot of people will come to me and unfortunately just have no score. Unfortunately, in the lending business, that's I guess it's not as bad as bad credit, but we can't do much with it. We have to have a FICO score. So if a lot of people don't want to have a credit card, the one thing I would advise on that is you can get a credit card. Just don't, fill your tank and pay it off. You don't have to carry a balance. You don't have to pay interest. It's just activity on your credit report. But I'll give you some general guidelines. Okay, right now, FHA with us would go down to 580. Okay, there's definitely some higher expectations at that 580, okay, to 620. Once you're above 620, they relax their rules a little bit. Okay? Typically for conventional loans, you're looking at 660 and above. We'll go down to 620, depending on the loan to value and credit score. You guys, one of the biggest things from a lending standpoint is there's an automated underwriting system that these loans go through, which is basically takes all the criteria, your employment, your income, credit score, and it says approved or not approved. And that's one of the biggest certificates, and that's why credit scores are required in most cases. Okay, hopefully I answered your questions. Absolutely. With us, 740 and above is going to qualify you for best rates and terms. Okay, so there's definitely an advantage of having a credit score above 740. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Anything over 740, so if you have an 850, that's great. That would be your advantage. Anything above 740 is considered excellent. Okay, so if you have an 810, 850, you're definitely qualifying for the best things, available products out there.
What's the perfect score?
A perfect score, it depends on the bureau, but they range from 350 to 850. I've not seen an 850, but that's, like I said, anything over 740 is highly respectable credit score. Sorry, can you?
There is also another score called Advantage score or something, similar to FICO?
Well, with underwriting on mortgages, we're going to use what they call a FICO score. It's a different scoring model. We take TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian, and we go with your mid score between the three. I'm sorry, unfortunately, I do not know what the Advantage score is. We don't use that on the mortgage side of things.
I'm going to have Mike come up for just a moment here and maybe shift into the idea of when you get to a point that you're interested in looking at homes, thinking about real estate agents, and I've got three people here with three fairly different personalities and three different styles, and it's important to think about the real estate agent that you're working with because you're going to be with them for a bit, and they're helping you make a pretty big decision. So you want to connect, and you want to make sure that you feel comfortable with that person. So first, I'm going to have Mike come up here and talk a little bit, kind of going down that path.
Thank you, guys.
Hi there. Whoa, I'm loud. First thing I want to mention is this is a great big list up here on the board. Brian went over a whole lot of things. And it can be confusing because the many things that he went over, 3 of them are going to apply to you, 4 are going to apply to you, 5 are going to apply to you, 1's going to apply to you. It's not going to be this huge thing of, 640, 728, 50, 953, carry the 2. I don't know what you're talking about. But some are going to apply. So it's going to be a lot simpler once you're actually in the position, okay? Like you have a concern about PMI. You have a concern about a down payment. You have a concern, everybody's got their different hot button, okay? So when talking about your real estate agent and what our role is, it's not necessarily just to go unlock the door and say, well, there's a kitchen, there's a bedroom, you want to go to the next one? I mean, there's a lot more to it. We act as effectively the orchestrator of all that. In addition, the negotiation. So if we're doing a good job, and we find a good seller, you're paying as little of this as possible, right? Because the more money that you have to spend is the less money you get to go to Lowe's and buy paint and have carpet put in and buy a new stainless fridge and all that kind of stuff, right? So our role is sort of the orchestrator of the party, right? The negotiator for you on your behalf, and finding you the right house. Now, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, finding you the right house was probably solely our job. Anymore, you guys have heard of the internet, right? You have that here? Okay. Cord goes into the computers. I'm not sure how it works. But anyway, a lot of people are finding their homes on their own. They're looking online. They're sitting at night when they get home from work, and they're spending 6 hours on Zillow looking at every house in the nation. And then they email us, hey, I want to look at these 3. Cool. We email you back. Let's add these 2 to the list. So it becomes a kind of concerted effort on actually finding the house. The more important part of our role comes in, at least in my opinion, is all this. Because it's a lot to take in, and it's not nearly as difficult as it looks. Brian offers a ton of different products in terms of lending. So I think that, and then to Tom's point, in terms of the fact that you're going to spend a lot of time with that person, when you hire an agent, and I urge you. Is that me? Okay. I urge you to really take the term that I mentioned, hire, specifically. Okay? Don't think, I just pick whoever and I met that person. Cool. Get somebody whose personality is going to work for you. Get somebody who you feel like is actually going to work for you. If they're not, find somebody different, because it has to be a hand-in-glove kind of situation, and if it's not, then you're in the wrong boat. You're not going to find someone that's going to work hard for you. You know, maybe they could have negotiated a little harder. Maybe they could have showed you this. Maybe you could have saved $2,000. Maybe it's not that important to me as an agent, but guess what? It's your $2,000. It's pretty important to you. So those would be things that I would consider: personality, I'd consider their experience, I'd consider their negotiation skills, and just how you feel comfortable with them. You know, everybody can judge a character, and maybe that's why I don't get a lot of business. No, but everybody has that kind of gut feeling when you meet somebody. So I urge you to really take it seriously when you do pick somebody, because it is. I mean, when you guys all applied for your jobs, I'm sure you weren't the only candidates. They met several of you, and they picked you for some reason. It's the same with us, only we have to get hired all the time. So any questions on that? Any questions that you have for our role as that person in your transaction? Yes.
How do you determine what home inspector that you use? Do you have a pool? Do you have a pool of a list of home inspectors that you choose?
Good question. She asked about home inspections. So that's one of the first steps, actually one of the second steps in the process, I should say. Once you actually put a contract on a home, as a general rule, you have 10 days from the date that everybody signs the contract, buyer, seller, right? You got Brian mentioned fully executed contract. What fully executed contract means is you're under contract. You've agreed to buy that house at a particular price. The seller's agreed to sell that house at a particular price. Boom, you got a contract. That day, this clock starts ticking. You got 10 days to get in there and do what you're talking about, a home inspection. Short answer is yeah. Most of us agents have had inspectors that we've worked with, that we've had good experience with and can recommend to you. At the end of the day, though, at least the way I work, and again, like Tom said, we all have different ways of doing business, different personalities. I try not to get too involved with the inspection, and the reason for that is you hired me to find you the home, to work through this process. When you pick an inspector, I feel like that's a contract between you and the inspector. You hired him or her because you trust them, and they need to go through without a jaded view of what's going on. Once that's done, then it's my job to help you go through the report, determine what's reasonable to ask for, if anything, in terms of repairs. But the short answer to your question is yes. Most of us have inspectors that we've worked with in the past. You know, here's a list of 3 or 4. Call them up, see what you think. And again, it's kind of the same thing. You're also hiring that person. This is potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars that you're buying, and you kind of want to know what's there. So.
I had another question real quick
I'll
about
fall off the steps.
inspectors.
Oh, okay, yeah. We're gonna pass the mic. Excuse me.
Pass the mic.
You mentioned signing a contract before, and you have 10 days to get inspected wherever. Is there an out if I find a giant crack in the foundation?
Absolutely, yes. We've got 10 days to do home inspections, and like Mike said, we all do our business a little differently. I personally feel as though I give my clients a list of the different home inspectors that are out there. They choose who they would like to go with. We go through the process, but I personally like to go with them. And I like to see what the issues are. Because if there's a main issue, I want to be aware and understand exactly what the location and what's going on. So when we write an addendum, I'm fully aware of what's going on with that situation. But yes, if there's a major problem, you have every right to say, due to home inspections, I've chosen to withdraw my offer. Say there's black mold that we didn't see when we looked at the house. Yeah. There's certain major issues that you have to weigh as a buyer. Is it worth it to me to have that fixed, or no, let's forget it. Let's just, move on to another home. Yes.
I have a question. What if after you sign the contract there's been a major life change? Is there still a way to get out of that contract with that?
Absolutely. I would just write an addendum and basically state, due to personal situations, I have to withdraw my offer due to whatever the case may be. Yeah. And most people, now depending on who you're buying it from, if you're buying it from a homeowner, most people are pretty receptive to that. Depending if it's a day before closing, then you may be in a bad situation. Okay. Because you have those 10 days. You're in a legal you've bound yourself to a legal agreement, okay? And in those 10 days, we've gone through home inspections, and you've been pre-approved, and Brian's given you the thumbs up, we are clear to close, and you find out something's happened. I'm not sure you could lose your earnest deposit, day before closing. So that can be a little sticky, yeah.
I'm thinking on things like you find out that out of a two-party household, somebody's lost their job. You realize financially you're not going to be able to support that mortgage now.
Then you could say, due to lending, I have to withdraw my offer, and legally and technically in the contract it states. And I may be wrong on that.
There's two contingencies. Number one, the inspection contingency, which, like, to your question, you can back out. There's a crack in the foundation, the roof's falling in, the house is sliding into the lake, whatever. I'm done. You get your money back like it never happened. Same thing with lending. There's a lending contingency. If you can't get your loan, and there's even more than that. Let's say you signed a contract that the loan rate was going to be less than 5.5% or something like that in the contract, and all of a sudden we wake up one morning and, hey, the rates are 11%. You can back out of your contract. There's lots of contingencies for buyers.
Yeah, but it's not so good for the sellers sometimes, because the seller has their house off the market for a good month and a half, 2 months, and they think they're going to sell this house, and for unknown reason they have to back out. Yeah, there's nothing in there that really protects the seller too much. You got a lot of protection as a buyer. Any other questions?
What makes the limit on the?
That's just it's in the legal purchase agreement. I don't know whoever came up with the 10 days. Now,
If the offer says 15 days.
yes. Now you can, when you write the offer, if say you're working with an agent and you say, I really would rather have 15 days to do this, we surely can put that in the purchase agreement up front. So you want to make sure, to let the agent know if you do need that extra time. Yes.
So thinking a little bit more about inspections, one of the questions that was popping up into my mind is, what if there's some sort of seasonal problem? Like, let's say you purchase the house in early fall and you find out in the spring that it's prone to the sump pump flooding in the spring and summer, or there's some other problem with water leaking in. Is there any kind of recourse for that, especially if it wasn't disclosed by the home seller if they knew it?
That's key. If it's disclosed in the disclosure and you've done your home inspections, you're pretty much, I'd put my money into getting it fixed versus trying to sue someone. But if they've never put anything in, the disclosure, then you may have a leg to stand on.
Okay.
Because legally and technically, that's what a seller fills that disclosure out and tells you everything that's going on with that house.
Can you explain the disclosure a little bit more?
Well, when a client lists their home, well, you want to go ahead and explain that?
Okay. Typically, when a client decides to sell their home, we do have the disclosure statements. Now, disclosure statements are filled out by the current homeowner, and we ask them to be 100% honest. That means anything to their knowledge. Now, when you're talking about a seasonal thing, you may come into a thing in 2007. I'm sure we all remember 2007 when it rained and rained and rained. Even people who had never had water in their basements got water in their basements. I did. It came up through the basement floor. It didn't come in from the walls. It didn't come in from the top. It came in from the bottom. No one could foresee that coming. At that point, that might be a one-time thing. And if it had been if maybe the previous owner had only lived in the home 3 years, they may never have experienced it. So on their disclosure, they're not going to disclose it. They didn't know. Now, say we get into a home and we have an inspection done. When you have water seeping into the home for any length of time, there is what they call scaling on the walls. There's traces along by the furnace. You can see a little, maybe an inch and a half up, a half inch up from the bottom, from the floor to the furnace. You'll see a little bit of rust. Maybe you'll see it in some other places. Your home inspector is going to notice those things, and he's going to point those out to you. And at that time, he's going to say, well, we see scaling on the wall over here, which means we've got some water coming through. I don't see water stains on the floor, so this could be a seasonal thing, or it could be simply the eaves troughs are full of leaves and things, and the water is, instead of coming down properly, it's being forced down along the wall. Water's coming into the basement. That's a maintenance issue. That's an easy fix. But if we see where water's actually coming into the basement, or we're seeing rust along the bottom of the furnace, that means we've had standing water. You can also tell if we've got a basement that may have paneling in it. That's going to suck that water up. You're going to see the bowing along the bottom of the boards. At that point, we know we have a water issue. It hasn't been disclosed. We go back to the homeowner. We ask again, has there been any water issues? They say no. You decide you really want the home. You purchase it, and guess what? Next year you get flood. Well, at that point, they said no. We kind of thought it was there, so we've kind of taken that burden. So you want to listen to your home inspector. When he's explaining things or you have any questions, there's no such thing as a dumb question when you're talking about this kind of an investment. Ask it and be prepared. If it's a home that you love, there are other options. You can have the basement waterproofed. Do your homework. Go online. Talk to people who've had this problem and talk to people that know what they're talking about. 10 days, though, guys. 10 days to do your home inspection and do your homework. The sooner you get your home inspector in there, the sooner they discover a problem, the more time we have to research that problem and weigh out what your options are. So listen to your home inspector. That's very important. Yes, sir.
Are there any disclosures that the seller is legally required to acknowledge?
Oh, yes, that's what our disclosure is, and it is a legal form. But like I say, we ask everybody to be 100% honest, and sometimes they are because because they're supposed to be, but sometimes there's things that they don't even know. They may not know that they have asbestos wrapped around their pipes. It's a 1940s home. It's always been there. It's wrapped up. They don't even question it. They've owned the home there's been 3 or 4 owners. Then we discover there's asbestos. As long as the asbestos isn't disturbed, we don't have a problem. If you're going to be doing major remodeling and it has to be removed, now you have a different situation. Can it be addressed? Yes. We can do research, find out what it's going to cost to have the asbestos removed, and the best way to deal with that. Once we know what the cost is, then we can renegotiate the contract if it's necessary. Anything else? Well, it looks like we've got a lot of your questions answered. If you think of anything else, feel free to contact our office or any of your local realtors. That's what we're here for, is to answer your questions. But the key thing to remember, in addition to getting your pre-approval is that allows you to know what you can pay for a home. You don't have to go that high. You can go lower, but it's where you're comfortable at in that payment. And this next big thing is find one realtor that you like to work with, because that's important. One realtor that you like that's going to work with you is going to send you information on homes. They're going to send you different listings. They're going to do investigation work for you. They're going to really research what you're going to buy. When you start talking with 3 or 4 different realtors and you've got everybody showing you houses, it can get really very confusing for everyone. So when you're ready to look for a home, talk to your lender first, and then hire a realtor to work with you. Well, thank you very much, and you guys have a great afternoon.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate the presentation. Tom, do you have any closing words before we wrap this up for questions?
Just to reiterate what Betty said, again, there are a wide range of personalities. I have people working in our office with 40 years of experience who don't have a smartphone, but that doesn't mean that they're not good agents. It just means that if you're someone who's going to send a text at 10 o'clock at night, that may not be the person for you. So again, think a little bit about personalities, think a little bit about how you like to communicate, and find that person, because again, I mean, it's a big decision, it's a big investment, and you want to make sure that the person that you're working with is someone that ultimately you're going to be comfortable with. Again, I think another thing that's important, we keep using the word hire, and truly you are hiring that person, but ultimately when you're buying a home, remember that your real estate agent is actually getting paid by the person selling the home. So that, you know, you're hiring them, but ultimately you're not paying them, and that's probably an important thing to remember. Oh, okay, yeah. So pre-approvals are valid for typically 120 days. Yeah. As I said earlier, we have 40 offices. We have offices as up to Traverse City, Mackinac area. We have several offices in the Grand Rapids market. We have offices in South Haven, 3 offices in Kalamazoo, Gull Lake. We have 5 offices over in the Detroit market area now. And then we have 3 offices in northern Indiana, all kind of along the Elkhart, South Bend area. So, but 40 offices throughout the state, and 37 throughout the state. Yes, sir. So, as Trina mentioned, I think at the very beginning of this, our company had been in this market for many, many years as Prudential Preferred Realtors, and Prudential Preferred about a year and a half ago chose to move away from the real estate market. Their financial services, their insurance markets were the things that they cared about participating in the most. So they were looking to spin off their real estate division. Warren Buffett decided that he thought real estate was a good thing to get involved in, and with a long-established brand like Prudential available, he chose to do that. We were very fortunate that under the Warren Buffett umbrella in Berkshire Hathaway, most of the companies that they own don't get to tag on the Berkshire Hathaway name. So we're very fortunate that we were able to take part of that. There are actually a couple of different companies involved. Berkshire Hathaway is one of those. Another major key component of this is a company called Brookfield, which is the second largest relocation company in the country. So those are really our 2 major partners, which are pretty great. So you know, it's Berkshire Hathaway Home Services is effectively a franchising system, for lack of a better way to say it. So our owner, the gentleman that owns our company, has 40 locations that are basically Berkshire Hathaway franchises.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Trina.
I'm going to talk just a little bit more here about the services that Relocation Assistance provides. In my office, I'm mostly a referral agent, and what happens there is if you're transferring in or if you're transferring out, you come to me with all your questions, and what I do is I can't be an expert for everything in the field, so what I do is I make sure I have in my back pocket the handy-dandy people to call that could better assist you. Hence, our partnership with the team that's sitting in front of us here. She's laughing because I'm stumbling over your name. I keep doing that. I apologize. But with that being said, as a relocation assistant manager, I also help you troubleshoot some of the ideas that you have or the stresses that you have in your family with the transition. So please be sure to call me if you need any help. If I can't help you, I certainly can get a hold of some people that can. With that being said, we have come up with a plan of training or informational sessions in the future here. There's one each month for the next few months. I highly recommend that you look at the MWR newsletter, All News, Facebook. We've got them all advertised out there. So, and if you have any recommendations of courses that you'd like to see or some things that we're not hitting on, certainly get a hold of me, my supervisor. Our marketing specialist sitting in the back is Tiffany Schmidt. Get with any of us, present your ideas to us, and we'd be glad to expand upon them. With that being said, if you have any additional questions, they're probably more personal questions, and the team's going to be available. We can spread them out across the room, so it can be truly a personal question, and they'll be here for a little while. So if you have those questions, feel free to stand by, and they'll help you. Again, thank you for coming and doing that presentation for us, and thank you all of you for coming, and be sure to share with your friends that we have some good news to share. Thank you. Bernie's question is, do I help retirees transfer? And the answer is, my office is open to anybody in the government that is transitioning in and out. I don't put a label on if you are DOD, if you are a contractor, if you are, military. I don't put a label on it. GSA, I've helped them. So yes, if you're transferring in, transferring out, if you're moving around the city, if you're moving out of the state, if you're moving into the state, out of country, come see us. We can help you somehow. Does that help you? Well, we might have to get you a mover, Bernie. All right, thank you.